The morning the bulldozers rolled in, I knew my life was about to change forever. The screech of metal on stone pierced the quiet air outside my window, and the sprawling, century-old garden my great-uncle had nurtured was buried under a cold slab of concrete. The acrid stench of diesel and cement dust choked the breeze as Margaret Voss, the iron-fisted head of the Homeowners Association, stood smugly with her arms crossed, looking like she'd just won a high-stakes poker game. She didn't know I'd spent years as a hydrologist with the National Water Agency, mapping rivers and floodplains. Her reckless act was like dropping a grenade into the heart of our quiet coastal town of Willow Bay. 6 months later, when the autumn rains hit, Margaret's pristine, million-dollar mansion sat in a muddy quagmire, their foundations buckling, while my weathered seaside cottage stood untouched, as if the flood had never happened. Stick around, because the real storm is just brewing. Water had always been my world. As a hydrologist, I'd spent decades studying its flow, its power, its ability to carve through stone or destroy in an instant. My great-uncle, Thomas, a man I knew through family tales and the sturdy cottage he'd built, had shared that same reverence for the land. A self-taught engineer, he believed in harmonizing with nature, not conquering it. His philosophy was woven into every plank of this house and every contour of the land. After leaving my agency job, I'd come back to Willow Bay, the sleepy coastal town where I'd spent childhood summers. This wasn't just a house site, it was a legacy. The garden, with its wild seagrass, native ferns, and subtle dips in the earth, wasn't just pretty. It was a vital piece of the town's ecosystem, a natural sponge for rainwater, channeling it safely to the sea. Thomas had designed it that way, a quiet masterpiece of foresight. The trouble started with a glossy letter from the HOA, demanding I modernize my garden to match the neighborhood's new standards. It was signed by Margaret Voss, the self-appointed queen of Willow Bay. I'd met her auntie, a woman with a sharp platinum bob and a smile as cold as the ocean in winter. She carried herself like she owned the town. I sent back a detailed report, explaining in plain terms that my garden wasn't a mess, but a critical part of the town's drainage system. I thought logic and science would win the day. I was wrong. Margaret's response was a certified letter dripping with legal jargon, threatening fines and liens if I didn't comply. I tried to reason with her, but her assistant, a nervous woman named Susan, blocked me at every turn, chirping about Margaret's grand vision for Willow Bay. My neighbors, lifelong locals, avoided me, whispering about property values and that outsider. Margaret had painted me as the villain before I could even fight back. Then came the bulldozers. It was a crisp October morning in 2024, the sky a flawless blue, when the roar of engines shattered my peace. I ran to the window, coffee spilling in my hand, and saw workers in neon vests ripping out ferns and grasses. The air reeked of fuel and wet cement. Margaret stood on the sidewalk, her smirk sharp enough to cut glass, directing the crew like a general. This wasn't just about my garden, it was an attack on Thomas's legacy. Rage burned in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. "Margaret," I said, stepping outside. She turned, her smile never wavering. "Oh, Daniel," she purred, "we're just giving your yard the facelift it needs. You'll thank me later." I pulled out my phone and started recording. Her eyes narrowed. "What are you doing?" she snapped. "Documenting this," I said. "You've ignored every warning. This is illegal." Her face hardened. "This is an HOA action to protect our town's value. You'll hear from our lawyers." She turned away, dismissing me like I was nothing. That moment lit a fire in me. I wasn't just going to incorporating a sense of urgency. I spent days photographing the destruction, logging every move the crew made. The concrete slab they left behind was a gray scar on Thomas's legacy, a silent insult. But as I walked the edge of the slab, I spotted some muddy patch where the concrete hadn't fully set. Kicking aside a broken chunk, I found a rusted pipe, part of an old drainage system Thomas had built. It was a clue, a piece of his genius buried under Margaret's arrogance. I knew this was the key to her undoing. Margaret's campaign to isolate me intensified. A flyer appeared on every mailbox, my concreted garden plastered across it with the headline, "A Threat to Willow Bay's Future." It was unsigned but screamed Margaret's handiwork, branding me as a troublemaker tanking property values. Neighbors I'd known for years turned away, fear in their eyes. Margaret's reign was built on intimidation, and she wielded it like a weapon. But a crack appeared in her armor one evening as I walked back from the beach. Old Mr. Harris, a reclusive gardener who'd lived here forever, waved me over. "Be careful, Daniel," he whispered, glancing around. "She's got eyes everywhere. She's been meeting with some fancy lawyer at a firm on Cove Street." He slipped me a scrap of paper with the address and scurried inside. It was a spark of hope Margaret wasn't untouchable. I visited the sleek law firm on Cove Street, posing as a client. They handed me a card for a lawyer named Mr. Caldwell, a specialist in commercial real estate with ties to a huge, undeveloped lot next to Willow Bay. Why was Margaret, the HOA tyrant, cozying up to a developer? The plot thickened. Then came another blow, a red-stamped HOA letter demanding I pay for the concrete, labor, and crippling fines, threatening to seize my cottage if I didn't comply within 30 days. This wasn't just about money, it was a war for my home, my heritage. Thomas's words echoed in my mind. A house isn't just wood and stone, Daniel. It's the land it stands on. I unrolled his faded blueprints and found a faint line under my garden, marked with a note. The lifeblood of the land. Protect it from those who'd choke it. Thomas had foreseen this threat, embedding a legal safeguard in the land's deed. I needed help, so I found Laura Hensley, a no-nonsense lawyer who thrived on battling HOA bullies. Her office was a cluttered mess of papers and coffee cups, but her eyes lit up as I showed her Thomas's blueprint and the rusted pipe I'd uncovered. "Your great-uncle was a genius, Daniel," she said. "This isn't about aesthetics, it's about water rights. That's a whole different fight." At the next HOA meeting, Margaret brandished a blurry geological report, claiming my garden's soil was unstable, justifying her concrete slab as a community safety measure. I stood up. "Who wrote that report, Margaret? I want the original, with the company's name." Her glare could have burned holes through me. "That's confidential," she snapped. "This isn't a forum for your conspiracies." But I wasn't alone anymore. Laura was in my corner. We dug through dusty public records and struck gold. A 1952 deed tied to Thomas's property, stating that any alteration blocking water flow was environmental harm, legally actionable. It was a bombshell, a safeguard Margaret had buried. But she fought dirty. A local news site ran a hit piece, "Willow Bay Man Endangers Town," painting me as unhinged, quoting anonymous neighbors. It was Margaret's doing, a desperate bid to ruin me. Then, one night, I heard scraping outside. 2 men in overalls were tearing down my new fence, and Margaret's SUV pulled up. "Your fence looks shabby, Daniel," she sneered. "We'll bill you for a new one." It was a personal attack, a power play to break me. But I wasn't breaking. I contacted an old agency colleague, Sarah, an expert in satellite imagery. She sent images showing a natural watercourse running through my garden. Thomas's lifeblood. It was the heart of Willow Bay's drainage, and Margaret had choked it. Then, an anonymous email arrived with a grainy video. Margaret, her cousin, and a developer laughing over a map, plotting to clear my swampy garden for a massive tech hub. Laura called it gold, proof of a premeditated scheme. At a packed town hall meeting in January 2025, I laid it all bare. I showed the satellite images, Thomas's blueprint, and the 1952 deed. I explained how Margaret's concrete had dammed a vital watercourse, threatening floods especially for her street, the lowest point in town. A retired nurse stood up, trembling. "Margaret threatened my license when I questioned her construction," she said. The room buzzed with shock. Margaret leaped up. "He's lying. He's a bitter loner ruining our town." I played the video, the developer's voice booming. "Once we ditch that old cottage and its swamp, we're golden." The crowd gasped. Margaret's tech hub wasn't about beauty, it was a greedy land grab, sabotaging the town's water system for profit. A quiet man, Mr. Ellis, a retired engineer, stood with a binder of Thomas's blueprints. "I worked with Thomas," he said. "He built a drainage system for this whole town. The concrete destroyed its core, but the rest still holds." His words gave my fight weight, turning it into the town's fight. In court, Margaret's lawyer, Mr. Pierce, painted me as a paranoid outsider. But Laura countered with experts, a soil scientist debunking Margaret's report, an engineer confirming the watercourse's role. The video sealed it, exposing Margaret's cousin and the developer's plot. On the stand, Margaret crumbled, rambling about her noble tech hub, admitting to bribing an official. The courtroom froze. She'd confessed. Laura called a final witness, Mr. Grant, an 80-year-old surveyor. He brought a 1960 film showing Thomas mapping the drainage system, a testament to his vision. The silent footage played, Thomas's smile haunting the room. The jury didn't need to deliberate long. Margaret and her cousin were convicted of fraud, conspiracy, and endangerment. The official she named was ruined. As she was led away, I felt no triumph, just relief. The truth had won. The aftermath was chaotic. Reporters swarmed, but I focused on restoration. Neighbors, once cowed by Margaret, helped rip up the concrete, uncovering Thomas's pipes. We replanted, reviving the garden. When the rains came, the water flowed as Thomas intended, sparing my cottage while Margaret's mansion sat in ruin. The town rewrote the HOA charter, ensuring no one could repeat her crimes. I wrote a book about Thomas's legacy, not revenge, but restoration. It took off, pulling me into a new life as a voice for communities like ours. One spring afternoon, kids from Willow Bay brought a hand-drawn sign. "Thank you, Daniel," with my garden in bright colors. They begged for stories about Thomas, and as I spoke, I realized the real victory wasn't the courtroom, it was these kids, carrying his legacy forward. The war was over, but the work of building a community had just begun. What would you do if someone tried to erase your family's legacy? How far would you go to protect your home? Have you ever faced a bully like Margaret? Share your thoughts below, and if you believe in fighting for what's right, like and subscribe for more stories of resilience and justice.